and thanks for joining us, and thanks for all the good work that you're doing. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what Global Green's doing, and the program that you're coordinating?
Sure. So Global Green is a national environmental nonprofit. We have offices in New York, DC, LA, and New Orleans, and we basically run a multifaceted range of programs around the country underneath the umbrellas of green urbanism and resource recovery. And as a part of one of the bigger projects we've been working on under resource recovery over the past couple of years is working to help expand the implementation of food scrap collection programs in multifamily buildings. So like compost collection in apartment complexes. And one program that came out of the model that we're putting forth is our program. So an eco-ambassador is basically someone in an apartment complex that wants to take a little bit more ownership over the waste diversion program in their building and can serve as an on-site resource for their neighbors. So one of the main challenges that we face in multifamily recycling programs is high turnover rates. So theoretically, that eco-ambassador would be someone who plans to stay in the building for a long period of time. And so as tenants move out of the building and new neighbors move into the building, that eco-ambassador can take it upon themselves to go and introduce themselves to their new neighbor and explain the waste diversion program in that building and let them know where they can get any resources such as a kitchen food scrap pail to keep in their kitchen, or different educational materials like food waste prevention strategies, different things like that. So we've been working throughout California to expand that program, and we're also trying to work with other cities around the country in order to help them implement an eco-ambassador program.
Great. And I know you're also conducting a survey of other eco-ambassador programs. So can you talk to us a little bit about what kind of results you have, and maybe compare the different eco-ambassador programs, just so that we understand what parts of what program work best according to your situation?
Sure. So I have some notes here. Basically, our program is still really new. We've had about 4 training workshops. So what that means is in the beginning of the year, we had several recruitment events to try and gauge public interest on if the communities that we're working in want these eco-ambassador programs. And we had a lot of public support in that, so that was encouraging. And then over this summer, we've hosted a few training workshops, which is like a 2-hour workshop where we basically make the tenants experts, waste experts for the city that they live in, and then teach them how to talk with their landlord, how to talk with their neighbors, how to teach their neighbors about waste, and basically when they come out of this 2-hour workshop, they should be fully confident on how to be an eco-ambassador in their community. To date, we've had a pretty good turnout in our training workshops of like 10 to 15 ambassadors coming out of there for each workshop. And we only hope that number will increase. As for results of the ambassadors, we don't have that data yet, just because our program is really new, but that is something that sets our program apart from others, in that we've talked to other cities with eco-ambassador style programs, and they don't really keep in touch with ambassadors after the training workshop. They keep the metrics of how many people came to the workshop, but they don't necessarily reach out to the ambassadors after the fact to see if they actually perform the outreach to see how the program is going. So that's something that we're trying to implement, something that we're trying to solve. And next week we're sending out our first round of post surveys to the ambassadors that came to our first workshops to see just how successful they were with the tools that we gave them. Whereas in the city of Seattle, their Friends of Recycling and Composting program, they've served they have over 5,000 multifamily buildings, and since 2010, they've trained over 750 ambassadors, so that's a pretty robust program. Similar to the city of Toronto in Ontario, Canada, their trainings are 3-hour trainings, and plus they require 10 hours per month extra time of their ambassadors, and they've trained 370 ambassadors to date. And so these ambassador-style programs are found all over the place, at least as far as North America that we're aware of. But they all kind of collect different metrics, and they all kind of teach their ambassadors different things. For example, in Washington, D.C., they have more of an overall holistic sustainability volunteer program rather than just waste ambassadors. So I don't know, it seems to us that it seems to be a pretty successful way of reaching out to the community and of educating people.
Right. I mean, the way we could understand the ambassador programs is if you're in a city which wants to make change, and then, which wants to progress with their waste management system, and if there are also citizens which want to do something similar, then the ambassador program could connect both of them. I mean, it could provide support to the city from the citizens, and then for the citizens from the city. So is that one way to understand, this ambassador program?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons why we're trying to expand this ambassador style approach is because we found that when rolling out these recycling and organics collection programs, face-to-face outreach with residents is key in order to boost participation. And so that's really resource intensive. Sending a paid staff person, whether it be from a city or a third party, to go out and perform this outreach, it takes several hours and several tries at each building to try and reach as many people as possible. And so by using ambassadors, this is a voluntary position for them, and they're most likely a self-motivated person. They care about whatever it is that they're talking to their neighbors about. And also by having someone in that building be the one performing that outreach, oftentimes the community, or they represent the needs of their community, and so they can kind of get over any language barriers that might be present, or they might be able to translate materials in whatever languages need to be translated to. Or even we found that, in some buildings, people are more likely to open the door to a neighbor than they are to some random stranger on their doorstep. And so it's a more resource efficient way for city agencies to perform this outreach, whatever the outreach might be
about. Right. And what kind of cities does a program like this work? I mean, we discussed this during the test run. So does this work only in progressive cities, which have already done quite a bit with their systems, with their waste management systems, or is there also potential for ambassador programs to work in other cities? What are your thoughts? What have you seen?
I think there's potential for ambassador programs in wherever the city might be on the progressive spectrum. I mean, Global Green is headquartered in the city of Santa Monica, that has a pretty progressive plan for sustainability. So we found a lot of public support very easily here for this program, and they're trying to roll out their organics collection programs on top of their already robust recycling program. But for example, we're also working more of a consultant to the city of Atlanta. And they're just trying to better roll out their just recycling program. And then, they'll have the Eco Ambassador program to help boost recycling. And then, whenever they're ready to roll out organics collection, then they can just add that on to the ambassador curriculum for their training workshop. As far as waste goes, I think the ambassador program can help cities at whatever stage they're in to just increase education and to increase awareness and participation.
Right, and so as someone who's been implementing a program like this, so what are the challenges that you face, when you're doing this? What's the biggest challenge that you face, and how do you deal with that?
Sure. So we haven't encountered any challenges with recruitment of ambassadors yet, so that's a positive. I mean, we're assuming maybe data collection will be a challenge. We don't know, since we haven't sent out that post survey yet, but we found since other cities haven't collected that data, maybe that would be a challenge. I mean, it's challenging to reach people when you're not face to face with them in the first place. Not everyone checks their email all the time. Not everyone will return phone calls. So, we're hoping the data collection won't be too much of a challenge, but I wouldn't rule it out. Let's see. We're also asking ambassadors to perform lid flip waste audits. So that means that you open a waste bin, and just from what you see on the contents of the top, how much contamination is in the bin, and how full it is. And I spent most of this spring in a dumpster, and I'm perfectly happy that way. But I can assume that like a lot of citizens wouldn't necessarily want to, touch the lid or even look inside, have to deal with the smell. So we're assuming that that point of data will also be a challenge to collect. But since our program is so early, we haven't exactly encountered that many challenges yet, but I'm sure they'll come up along the way.
Right, that's actually good. But do you also have any experience learning, surveying other campaigns, what kind of challenges they might be facing, and what they're doing about it?
Sure. So I think one challenge is, or rather, one challenge that other cities might have in implementing these programs could be recruitment and how to reach people, how to get the word out about this program. So, my suggestions for that would be to give it an online presence, especially through social media. I feel like that's a large part of why we have been able to reach such a wide audience, is because Global Green has a Facebook presence, we have an Instagram and a Twitter presence, and so we can really just boost out our flyers of come to this Eco Ambassador event, come to this training workshop, or we also work with city networks to put out advertisements and flyers through their newsletters, through their online newsletters. And other programs have had success in creating an online portal platform for their ambassadors to be able to communicate with each other and in order to disseminate information. So I guess that would be my suggestion to avoiding that challenge of not being able to reach very many people, is just really boost the online presence in order to maximize the amount of people that you can reach.
Right. So you're saying that Global Green having a good online presence to start with, and having good personal and professional networks kind of helped Global Green, address this challenge. And then you would suggest that these organizations also collaborate with other bigger organizations which have such online presence, or which can help.
Absolutely. Yeah, maximize any networks you have.
Right. All right. So, what are some frequently asked questions when you're, doing this workshops? What do people? How do people respond to them? What kind of mindset do they come into these programs, and what do you talk to them about?
Well, one really great thing that we found in our workshops is that those that are coming are really interested about waste, or about at least what they can recycle. So there's always a big conversation about we put on this graphic of the different things that can go into the blue recycling bin, and people are just, they're happy to have the information, but there's always lots of questions about the different types of plastics that can be recycled, as well as what to do with household hazardous waste like batteries and electronics. And we even take them through an exercise that just is a series of 25 images of different items, and ask them, okay, which bin would this go into? And so we found that residents are really interested and engaged in the different things that they can put into waste bins. So that's encouraging. As for other questions, it's always a bigger conversation of how to talk to your neighbors about this program, because we ask them to first, before they even talk to their landlord, to ask a few of their neighbors, if not all of them, depending on how big the building is, would they even be interested in having this organics collection program? Because that way, when you go to your landlord, you can say, most people in this building want this program, so that's a good reason to have us implement this program. And so I guess one bigger question, or rather just one point where I feel that the ambassadors are really engaged is in learning how to talk about waste, and in learning how to talk with their landlord, talk with their neighbors about waste, and how to educate their peers on proper waste diversion.
Right, and generally, recycling in apartments is a big problem in cities like New York, where most of the population lives in apartments. And I know there is Manhattan Solid Waste Authority Board SWAB, which is trying different ways in which they could engage more people in the apartments, in the recycling programs. So, do you have any suggestions for cities like New York or other cities who are starting out? And where does the drive to change come from? Does it generally in these programs that you see? Does it generally come from a nonprofit organization, or does it come from the city itself, or where does it come from? And depending upon where it comes from, how should each one of them think about making the program work or making the program bigger?
Sure. So what we've seen so far is that for the most part, these programs are put on by cities, or are run by cities, or sometimes it'll be run by the city, but the actual program, or rather, the program will be put forth by the city, but the city will hire a third party to run the program. And so, I guess suggestions for how other cities can facilitate these programs, or rather to really start them and to gauge public interest, is to start with the communities. Start small and work your way up, not just cast a wide net. And I guess that this would be more so for the case for New York, but I'm guessing for other cities, for other bigger cities as well, this would be the case, because every community is going to have different needs. Every community is going to need the education to be focused in a certain way. And so you can't just cast a wide net assuming that whatever value proposition you're putting forth is going to apply to everyone. So you really need to work with the smaller scale communities and then work your way up to a bigger program in order to make sure that the program is valuable to everyone that it reaches.
Right, and one final question. So we have another 9 minutes, and let me just remind viewers that you're watching Madisen Gittlin from Global Green. She's talking about she's talking about engaging apartment buildings in recycling, and how ambassador programs could help cities or nonprofits do this better, nonprofit change agents do this better. And if you have any questions for her or any comments, use the Q&A box below to submit them, and we'll try to get them answered. And Madisen, so could you also tell us a little bit about how Global Green got involved in doing an ambassador program? What was the motivation, or what was where the push came from? And also, can you tell us, what are the future plans for your program? Do you plan to expand to other cities, or do you plan to expand more in this city and then move on to other cities? What's your timeline and plan like?
Sure. So we started in the beginning of 2016 with a larger funded project to work in both the San Francisco Bay Area as well as LA County in implementing organic collection programs in 30 multifamily buildings throughout those two areas. And our program approach is testing the effectiveness of enhanced resident engagement strategies. So what that means is that we are testing the effectiveness of us going door to door or hosting some type of event in each building where we handed out kitchen food scrap pails and different educational materials in order to teach those residents how to divert their organic waste properly, and also how to recycle properly if the building wanted us to talk about recycling as well. And so informing this model, because we want to make it as replicable and scalable as possible for other city agencies to be able to adopt in their rollout of organics collection or of even recycling, We were doing some research initially and found the ambassador style program in the city of Seattle and in the city of Toronto that really, made it seem as if their program had a large effect in not only identifying buildings to roll out these organics collection programs, but also to boost participation in those buildings, because you can put a green cart at a building and, it could be that no one knows that it's there or how to use it. So by having, or by performing this outreach, or by having an ambassador at that building, you can better educate the residents on how to properly use that bin, so it's not just sitting there. And so we decided to start an or to try and recruit some eco ambassadors in some of those 30 buildings that we were initially working with, and the program just really jumped in that we received a lot of public support for it. So we figured, why not try and boost this program to be all that it can be, and see what kind of effect we can have in the communities that we're working with this eco ambassador program. So it's really just snowballed since about January of this year. And we now have a base of, I think, over about 70 people that have shown interest, around 10 to 15 people that are coming to those workshops. And then, where we see this program going, we'll be hosting workshops, I guess, probably throughout like early fall, and we'll be, retrieving those metrics that we spoke of earlier. And so I guess our role fall through winter, and where we see this program going in the future, is working with other communities that we haven't even worked with yet, and working in other cities or with other agencies to help them start their own eco ambassador programs.
Right. We have two questions for you. One of them is from Vivek Patil. He's asking, some citizens expect the benefits to appear quickly. So, what can be the short-term incentives for citizens to recycle? And the second question is from Charlotte, and she's asking, what feedback are you getting from the eco ambassadors themselves? So these are two questions. You could answer them in any sequence.
Sure. So so incentives to the resident for these eco ambassador programs, I mean, it's a challenge in multifamily buildings to really show what incentive these recycling and organics collection programs have to the resident, at least immediately, because they aren't the ones necessarily paying the trash bill, their property management is. So if they're able to increase their diversion, which would most likely decrease the landfill trash bill, because oftentimes in cities that are trying to put forth recycling and organics collection, the collection of the recycling and organics is offered at a lower cost than landfill. So if you're diverting more of your material out of the landfill bin and into your recycling bins, then that could result in a decreased frequency of collection, or maybe you get a smaller bin for your landfill trash. So there are a number of factors that could result in decreasing your trash bill, but that decrease isn't necessarily seen by residents. I guess one benefit to residents of these ambassador programs would be creating more of a community feel in their building. I mean, ambassadors can do whatever they want with the program. They can either just do the door-to-door and then call it a day, or they can even, host events in their building that bring the community together and talk about their food waste. We've seen programs where a community comes together to create a zero waste meal potluck. So it can really, depending on how involved the ambassador is, it can really create more of a community feel in a building or within a community itself, just by having these programs and by giving ambassadors the agency to work with the community in a way that maybe they didn't see possible before.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead, Madisen.
Oh, I was just going to move on to the next question.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so as for feedback from ambassadors, again, this is something that is coming with our post survey that we're sending out next week. But overall, you know, when we finish the training workshops, people in these workshops come up to us and just, you know, thank us for giving them these tools and this information on how to start these programs in their buildings, because we've met a bunch of people that are like, you know, I've really wanted this service in my building for so long, but I had no idea how to do it. And I had no idea that I could just reach out to the city and start the program, you know? We've overall just, you know, received the feedback of thanks for these tools and thank you for teaching us how to bring the programs to our buildings and how to, you know, talk to our landlord about it, because it's a useful skill.
Great. And one final question before you know, we move on to the next session. Are you just dealing with the recyclable waste, or is this something also that deals with organic waste, composting?
So our program so far has been focused on organic waste. But you know, other programs have only focused on recycling, or have focused on recycling first, and then we'll bring in organics when that city agency or service area is ready to bring on organics. But for the purposes of our program, at least in California, we're working with organics collection, because that's where that's kind of the new frontier of recycling in the state of California. We're pretty online with normal, you know, like plastic and metal recycling and paper. But organics is really the next mountain to climb. And so, yeah, since this program came out of our project that started last year in order to implement organics collection in multifamily buildings, we've mostly been working with organics collection.
Sorry, I was saying, great, wonderful. Thanks, Madisen. Thank you very much for your time. I greatly appreciate all the work that you're doing, and I wish all the best to your program. And so I'm going to, is there a, well, finally, before we leave, can you tell us about where people can learn more about your program, where they can go online to learn more?
Sure. So they can go to globalgreen.org and look through our projects or through our blogs, and they'll be able to find more information there. Yeah, that would probably be the best place to find information on it.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Madisen. Great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.